The security guard grabbed Ethan Carter by the arm right there in the lobby, right in front of his 7-year-old daughter, and started pulling him toward the exit. Richard Harmon, the hospital administrator, stood back and watched, arms crossed, not a flicker of doubt on his face. "Out," he said. "This hospital isn't yours. It never will be." The little girl screamed, "Daddy!" Every nurse, every visitor, every person in that lobby turned and looked, and not one of them said a word. But what Richard Harmon could never have imagined, not in 1,000 years, was that the man he was throwing out the door already owned the entire building they were all standing in. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story has traveled tonight. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. Because what you're about to watch unfold is going to stay with you for a long time. Nobody in the lobby of St. Gabriel Medical Center paid any particular attention to the man who walked in through the automatic doors at 8:14 on that Tuesday morning in November. And that was exactly how Ethan Carter needed it. He was white somewhere in his early 40s, with the kind of face that told you he'd worked outdoors for most of his life, a little weathered, a little worn, but with a steadiness behind the eyes that didn't match the rest of the picture. His jeans were clean but old. His work boots had seen better seasons. His canvas jacket was the kind you could buy at any hardware store, and he carried a faded backpack over one shoulder. In his arms he carried a 7-year-old girl wrapped in a fleece blanket with cartoon horses on it. The girl was his daughter. Her name was Lily. She had been sick for 4 days. When Ethan had pressed his hand to her forehead at 6 that morning in their kitchen in North Atlanta, the heat coming off her skin had made his stomach drop in the specific wordless way that only happens when it's your child. He walked to the front desk. A woman with a headset and the practiced inattention of someone who processes 100 faces a day glanced up at him. "Name," she said. "Carter, Ethan Carter. I have an 8:30 with Dr. Webb. Pediatrics. This is my daughter Lily." The woman typed. Her eyes moved to his clothes, to the jacket, the boots, the backpack, and back to her screen. The whole thing happened in less than 2 seconds, and she probably didn't know she'd done it. Insurance card and ID. Ethan unzipped his backpack with one hand and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were Lily's insurance card, his photo, ID, the appointment confirmation, and the referral letter from their family doctor, all organized with labeled tabs in black marker. He'd put it together the night before, while Lily slept, unable to do anything else with the worry. He placed it on the counter. The woman picked up the insurance card, looked at it. Looked at him one more time. "Have a seat," she said. "We'll call you." "The appointment is at 8:30, he said, still pleasant, still polite. "It's 8:15. "We'll call you when they're ready." He nodded, picked up the folder, carried Lily over to the row of chairs along the far wall and sat down. The older woman, 2 seats away, picked up her handbag and moved it to her other side without looking at him. Ethan noticed. He always noticed. He pulled Lily closer, tucked the blanket around her shoulders, and said nothing. They waited. 8:30 came and went. 8:45. 9 o'clock. The lobby moved at the pace of an ordinary Tuesday, not overwhelmed, not frantic. Phones rang. Staff moved at a regular clip. No visible emergency. No obvious reason. Lily had fallen asleep against his chest. Her breathing was slow, her weight heavy in the particular way sick children go, heavy, all their energy surrendered to the thing fighting inside them. He kept one hand flat on her back and felt each rise and fall. At 9:15, a man in a security uniform materialized at his elbow. Big through the shoulders. The stance of someone accustomed to people stepping back when they approach. "Sir," the guard said. His voice was neutral, professional. "I need to ask you a few questions." Ethan looked up. "Sure. Are you here as a patient or a visitor?" "I'm here with my daughter. She has an appointment with Dr. Webb." The guard looked at Lily, at the blanket, at the small pale face tucked against her father's shoulder. "I'll need to see documentation, appointment confirmation, and insurance." Ethan held out the folder without a word. The guard took it, went through it page by page, the referral letter, the confirmation printout, the insurance card, the ID. His face stayed neutral, but something in his posture shifted slightly as he read, like he'd expected to find a gap and hadn't found one. Around the waiting room, not a single other visitor had been asked to show anything. The guard handed the folder back. "Thank you for your patience, sir." "Of course," Ethan said. He watched the man walk back toward the administrative corridor. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small green notebook, the kind that fits in your palm, and wrote the time and one sentence beneath it. "Security check waiting room credentials requested of no other visitor." He underlined it, closed the notebook, settled in. They were called at 9:47. The nurse who took them upstairs was efficient and kind in exactly equal measure. She had the rhythm of someone who'd done this 10,000 times and still cared about the 10,001st. She took Lily's vitals with calm professionalism and told them Dr. Webb would be right in. She was right. 2 minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Caroline Webb was somewhere around 40, with reading glasses on a chain and a quality of stillness about her that good doctors develop over years of delivering hard news in small rooms. The kind of stillness that says to a frightened parent, "I'm not going anywhere. We have time." She came in carrying a chart, but she set it face down on the counter before she did anything else. She extended her hand to Ethan first. "Mr. Carter, I'm Dr. Webb." He stood and shook it. Then she turned to Lily, not standing over her, not talking around her to Ethan, the way some doctors do, but coming down to her level, pulling her stool over so she and Lily were eye to eye. "And you must be Lily," she said. "I'm Dr. Caroline. Can you shake my hand?" Lily looked at her father. He nodded once. She looked back at the doctor and shook her hand with the solemn gravity of a 7-year-old performing an important function. "Strong grip," Dr. Webb said. Lily almost smiled. "Can you show me where it hurts the most?" Lily put her hand on her stomach, then moved it to her chest. "Both," she said quietly. "Both. Okay. Thank you, that's really clear, that helps me a lot." Dr. Webb didn't take her eyes off Lily. "I'm going to listen to a few things and ask some questions, and your dad is going to be right here the whole time. Is that all right with you?" Lily looked at Ethan once more. He nodded. "Okay," she said. The examination was thorough and unhurried. Dr. Webb asked Ethan about the timeline when the fever started, what Lily had eaten, whether she'd had anything similar before. She was listening, not performing the act of listening, actually receiving what he said and hearing not just the facts, but the worry underneath them. When she finished, she sat back and looked at him straight. "Working diagnosis: gastrointestinal infection with secondary dehydration. I want blood work and a urinalysis to rule out anything else, and I'm recommending admission for 48 hours IV fluids monitoring rest." She paused. "I want you to hear this clearly. She is going to be okay. But you were right to bring her in today. Another day and we'd be having a different conversation." Ethan let out a slow breath. It was the first full breath he'd taken since 6 a.m. "Thank you," he said. "You did the right thing," she said. "You advocated for her. You got her here prepared. That matters more than people realize." She glanced at Lily, who was examining the stethoscope with drowsy curiosity. "We'll get a room set up on 3. You can stay, I'll put it in the notes. There's a chair that folds out." "I appreciate it," Ethan said. She was already turning to go. Then she stopped. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. "I'm fine. I'll have someone bring you coffee." It was such a small thing, such an entirely ordinary thing, and it landed somewhere in his chest and didn't move. He opened his notebook after she left, wrote her name, then drew a circle around it. They settled Lily into a room on the 3rd floor by noon. She had a window and a television and a nurse who got the IV in with the practiced speed of someone who understands that in pediatrics the fastest way is the kindest way. Within 2 hours, Lily had color coming back into her face and the drowsy, relieved look of a body that has finally been given what it needs. By 2 o'clock, she was asleep with an animated movie playing softly on the television, and Ethan was in the chair beside her bed with his notebook open on his knee. He wrote for 20 minutes, everything since 8 that morning, the front desk, the wait, the security guard, the other families in the waiting room who had not been asked to show their papers, the look on the administrator's face when he'd passed through the lobby. All of it in small, precise handwriting, the discipline of a man who had learned that memory is selective and paper is not. At the bottom of the page he wrote, "What is this place?" He drew a line underneath it, and he began his answer. He went down to the cafeteria for dinner. He took a tray and a bowl of soup and a cup of coffee that wasn't quite hot enough and sat at a table near the window. He was halfway through his soup when he heard a voice he recognized. Richard Harmon was 3 tables away. Ethan had clocked him twice already, once in the lobby that morning, once passing through the administrative corridor. Both times, the man had given him the same brief, dismissive appraisal. The look of someone inventorying items that don't belong. Now Harmon was at dinner with 2 men in suits and a woman Ethan recognized from the donor photographs in the lobby corridor. He was talking in the easy, expansive way of a man who is always performing and has forgotten that's what it is. "Private room bookings are up 32% this quarter," Harmon was saying. "That's what happens when you understand your market. St. Gabriel is not a community health center. It is a premier medical facility. Our patients expect and deserve a certain standard of care." One of the suited men said something. Harmon laughed. "The assistance programs?" He shook his head. "Phased out 2 years ago. The ROI wasn't there. You have to be practical. Compassion doesn't appear on a quarterly report." Ethan set his spoon down. He sat for a moment listening to the low ambient noise of the cafeteria around him. Then he picked up his tray, returned it to the rack, and walked out. He was passing the second-floor nurse's station when he saw her. A nurse in her early 40s with the kind of deep, bone-settled tiredness that builds up in a person over years of hard shifts and not enough support. She had a chart in one hand, a phone jammed between her ear and shoulder, and was typing with her free hand. Ethan waited. She hung up, set the chart down, looked at him. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "Is there a vending machine around? My daughter's been asking for crackers." Her face shifted just slightly, just enough. The small change that happens in good people when they get to step out of policy for 30 seconds and just be human. Down the hall, take a left-right by the family waiting room. She reached into her pocket. "You need quarters. I've got quarters." "I'm good, thank you." He glanced at her badge. Patricia Hollis, RN. "Have you worked here long?" She blinked. The mild surprise of someone not used to being asked. 11 years, she said. "You like it." She considered that, really considered it, visibly weighing the honest answer against the easy one. "I like my patients," she said. Ethan nodded once. "I understand." He walked down to the machine, bought crackers for Lily, and stood in the empty hallway for a long moment before going back to the elevator. He wrote in his notebook, "Patricia Hollis, RN, 11 years. Asked if she likes it. Answered, I like my patients." Underneath it, people like her are the reason any of this might still be worth saving. That night, he slept in the chair beside Lily's bed. Or rather, he half-slept, the shallow, alert rest that parents of sick children develop. One part of the brain goes quiet, the other keeps listening. He woke at 2 a.m. when a young nurse came in to check vitals. She was efficient, barely glanced at him, and was gone in 4 minutes. He lay in the dark after that, listening to Lily breathe, and he let himself think. In the world, most people saw Ethan Carter was a man in old jeans who drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it, and that was fine. He had worn those boots on concrete pours at 19. He had run his first job site at 25, with a crew of 8 who didn't know his last name, but knew he showed up earlier than any of them. He had built his first company at 29 on a $20,000 loan from a credit union, and the particular work ethic that comes from having grown up without a safety net. By 35, he had sold that company for a number that made his attorney laugh out loud. By 42, He ran an investment portfolio that anyone in institutional finance would have recognized immediately. But Ethan had made a decision early, and he had held to it. He would never become the kind of man who used money like a language, who walked into rooms and waited for people to perform recognition of who he was. He had watched other men do that. He'd watched what it did to them, how it hollowed them out, how it made them incapable eventually of seeing anyone who wasn't useful to them. And so when he needed to understand something, a company, an institution, a hospital, he went in as himself, the man he actually was underneath the acquisitions and the assets, a man in worn boots with a sick kid and a notebook, and the patience to sit still and let people show him who they were when they thought no one important was watching. It was the most valuable thing he had ever learned to do. He reached out in the dark and touched the edge of Lily's blanket. "We're going to figure this out, Bug," he said softly. She didn't stir. Her breathing was slow and steady. The fever finally broke in her color, the best it had been in days. He pulled out his phone. He had been recording since 8 the previous morning. He saved the file, labeled it Day 1. St. Gabriel started a new one. Set the phone face down on the arm of the chair and went back to sleep. On the morning of Day 2, a woman from administration came to find him. She located him in the third-floor family waiting room while he was on a call. She stood in the doorway with the professional patience of someone who is used to waiting but prefers not to. Her lanyard read, Sharon Elway Administration. He wrapped up the call. She stepped in. "Mr. Carter, I understand your daughter is in room 307. "That's right. I wanted to speak with you about our extended visiting guidelines, common areas." "Dr. Webb authorized my stay," Ethan said. She noted it in the file. Sharon paused, a brief recalibration behind the eyes. "I'll verify that. In the meantime, I wanted to make sure you're aware that our family waiting areas are designated for family members of patients," Ethan said. "I'm the father of the patient in 307. I believe that's what I am." Another pause. She produced a very professional smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the top half of the face. "Of course. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page." "I appreciate you coming to speak with me directly," Ethan said. And he meant it. He always meant it when he said that. Because the people who came to find you told you exactly who was paying attention. And the people paying attention told you everything about how an institution actually worked. After she left, he wrote her name in his notebook. He was building a picture. It was becoming clear very quickly. He heard it before he rounded the corner. The sound of authority being used as a weapon, not loud but low, and pressured the particular texture of someone speaking carefully in order to cause maximum damage with minimum accountability. He slowed. Richard Harmon was in the corridor outside the nurse's station, standing in front of Patricia Hollis. He was 6 inches taller than her, and he was using all of it, not touching her, nothing so obvious, just close. That particular close that men with power sometimes use with people who have less of it. Proximity as punctuation. Ethan stood at the far end of the hallway and listened. "I don't care what you told that family," Harmon said. "That was not your decision." "Their son is on a ventilator," Patricia said. Her voice was steady, but it was the steadiness of something held very tightly. "They have no idea how they're going to. Billing is not your concern." "They asked me. Directly. They're terrified." What was I supposed to say? "You were supposed to refer them to administration. That is it. That is the entire job." I told them there might be assistance programs available. "There aren't." Harmon's voice went flat. Final. "Those programs don't exist here anymore. When you tell families they qualify for things we don't offer, you create problems that administration has to manage. Do you understand what I'm telling you? He's 4 years old." Patricia's voice cracked on the last word just slightly, just for a half second, and she pulled it back. "He's 4 years old, and he's on a machine, and his parents haven't slept in 3 days, and I told them there might be help because I thought, you thought wrong." Harmon was already turning. "If you can't follow this institution's guidelines, I will find someone who can." He turned around and found Ethan standing at the other end of the corridor. Something moved across Harmon's face, not embarrassment, Nothing so human. The cold, focused irritation of a man who dislikes being observed. "Can I help you?" he said. "I was getting coffee," Ethan said. Easy, mild, giving him nothing. Harmon looked at him the same way he'd looked at him in the lobby. Same assessment. Same conclusion. "The cafeteria," he said, "is on the first floor." And he walked past. Ethan turned to Patricia Hollis. She was standing in the middle of the corridor, with her chart pressed flat against her chest, staring at the wall. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were bright. "You okay?" Ethan said quietly. She looked at him, blinked once. "Fine," she said. "Thank you." She walked the other direction. Ethan went back to his chair. He sat down, opened his notebook, and wrote down every word he could recall. Harmon's Patricia's the sequence, the tone. He wrote it with care because the recording in his pocket would have the audio, but not everything. Not the way she had pressed that chart to her chest. Not the specific dead weight in the phrase. Then they should have planned better. Some things you have to write down yourself. Bern. Over the next 24 hours, he watched the following. An elderly veteran, identifiable the way veterans always are, by the particular stillness they carry in their bodies, a discipline that never fully leaves, sat in the downstairs lobby for 4 hours and 11 minutes. Ethan timed it. During that same stretch, 3 patients who arrived through a different entrance were seen within 30 minutes. The veteran finally stood up and left without being called. On his way out, he thanked the woman at the desk. She didn't look up. A young mother came to the billing window alone, her hands unsteady as she pulled papers from her bag. Her son was being discharged in the morning. She needed a payment arrangement today right now before she left because she couldn't come back during the week without losing a shift she couldn't afford to lose. The woman at the window told her the assistance program ran through a third party with a 3 to 4 week turnaround. The mother stood at the window for another 5 minutes, asking every version of the same question she could think of, and getting the same answer each time. She finally walked away, holding papers she hadn't asked for, with a look on her face that Ethan recognized the look of someone who has just fully understood that the system is not going to help her, and who now has to go figure it out alone. A board member arrived through the side entrance. Richard Harmon met him personally, shook his hand, and walked with him upstairs. Ethan sat in his chair. He wrote it all down. He did not confront anyone. He did not raise his voice. He did not react. He understood that reacting would hand people a story about him, would let them file him away, manage him, dismiss him. Silence, he had learned over many years in many rooms, was the most powerful instrument he owned. More powerful than leverage. More powerful than money. Because silence let people forget they were being watched. And when people forgot they were being watched, they showed you everything. On the morning of day 3, Richard Harmon came to find him himself. He walked up to where Ethan was sitting in the 3rd floor waiting area and stood over him with his hands in his pockets and a patience that was not patience at all. It was control wearing patience's face. "I think it's time we had a conversation," Harmon said. "Sure," Ethan said. He looked up without moving. "You've been in this facility for 3 days. You've been in our common areas, our cafeteria, our corridors. I've had staff members report that your extended presence here is making people uncomfortable." "What specifically?" Ethan said. Harmon paused. "What have I done that's made someone uncomfortable?" Ethan continued, his voice unhurried. "I'd like to know what behavior specifically has caused an issue. Can you tell me?" 3 seconds of silence. "This is a medical facility," Harmon said. "We have expectations of conduct. I've been polite to every member of your staff," Ethan said. "I haven't disrupted anything. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't caused a single incident. My daughter is on the 3rd floor with an IV in her arm, and I am her father." He looked at Harmon steadily. "If you have a specific policy I've violated, I'd like to see it. If you have a specific complaint, I'd like to hear it. If neither of those things exists..." He let it sit. Harmon stared at him. For the first time, something flickered in the man's face. Not guilt, Nothing so accessible. More like the confusion of a man who has deployed his authority and found it hasn't landed anywhere. "This hospital isn't yours," Harmon said. He said it quietly. He said it with weight, the specific weight of a man who wants the words to reduce someone. Ethan held his gaze for a long moment. "Take care of my daughter," he said. "That's all I'm asking." Harmon left. Ethan watched him go. Then he took out his phone, composed 3 sentences, and sent them to the head of his legal team. The reply came back in under 4 minutes. He read it, put the phone away, went to check on Lily. She was sitting up in bed eating orange jello with the focused intensity of someone who has rediscovered an appetite after days without one. "Dad," she said when he came in, "when can we go home?" "Few more days," he said. He sat beside her. "Dr. Webb wants to make sure you're all the way better." "I feel better," she said. "Good." He reached out and touched her hair. "Few more days, Bug." She looked at him, 7 years old, and already in possession of her mother's particular ability to read him, even when his face gave nothing away. "Are you okay, Dad?" He smiled. The real one. "I'm right here," he said. "That's all that matters." She went back to her jello, and Ethan Carter leaned back in his chair in a hospital that he now understood far better than anyone inside it had the first idea of, and he looked out the window at the city below, and he thought through everything that was already in motion. Not for himself. For the veteran who had thanked the woman at the desk on his way out the door without being seen. For the mother with the shaking hands at the billing window. For Patricia Hollis, who had worked 11 years inside these walls and still answered the question with, "I like my patients." For every person in this building who deserved better than what they were being given by the man who had just stood over him and told him this hospital wasn't his. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his green notebook. He opened it to a clean page. At the top he wrote 2 words, "Not yet." The notebook had 17 pages filled by the morning of day 4. Ethan knew this because he counted them at 5:47 while Lily was still sleeping, and the hospital floor ran on its overnight quiet, that specific stillness unique to medical buildings in the pre-dawn hours, where the silence is layered and alert. Not peaceful. Watchful. Every sound had its own space around it. A cartwheel somewhere down the corridor. A monitor's slow, steady pulse from a room he couldn't see. A nurse's footsteps on linoleum, unhurried but purposeful, going somewhere that mattered. 17 pages. Names times incidents, direct quotes. The interior architecture of a place as it actually operated, layered against how it chose to present itself. He had filled 2 notebooks this way before in his career. Both of those companies were now under entirely different management. Neither of the people who had run them had seen it coming. He put the notebook back in his jacket pocket, stood from the fold-out chair without letting it creak, and looked at Lily for a long moment. She was sleeping on her side, facing him, one hand open near her face, the way she'd slept since she was an infant. The IV line ran from the back of her small hand to the pole beside the bed. The monitor showed everything where it needed to be. Her color was better than it had been in 4 days, not fully recovered, but the particular gray quality that sick children carry had left her face overnight, and what replaced it was something closer to rest. Genuine rest, the kind the body falls into when it finally has what it needs. Dr. Webb had come in the previous evening and told Ethan in the direct and unhedged manner he had come to trust completely that Lily was responding well, and that barring something unexpected, discharge was realistic within 36 hours. 36 hours. He pressed his fingertips briefly to his daughter's forehead. Her skin was cool. He held his hand there for a moment longer than the information required, because 4 days of fever makes you keep checking even after the fever is gone. He put on his jacket and walked quietly into the corridor. He was on his 2nd cup of coffee from the 3rd-floor vending machine when he heard Richard Harmon's voice coming from around the corner, low and pressured, that particular texture he'd already learned to identify on sound alone. The conference room off the administrative hallway. He didn't move toward it. He stood where he was, and he listened. "3rd write-up in 14 months, Harmon said. At this point, it's practically self-documenting. Legal's going to want a cleaner trail, another man said, a voice Ethan didn't recognize. Administrative. Careful. Legal will have one. I told her specifically last week, do not counsel patients or families on billing matters outside designated channels. Yesterday she did it again, in a corridor, in front of a family. Which nurse? Hollis. A brief pause that carried its own entire weight. 11 years in this building. Thinks that buys her latitude. The pause extended another half-second. It doesn't. Ethan's grip tightened on the paper cup. Are we moving forward? The other man asked. I want her out before the quarter closes, Harmon said. Get HR prepped and have the documentation in order by Wednesday afternoon. Footsteps. Harmon moving away from the room. Ethan stayed where he was and counted 10 seconds. Then he checked his voice recorder, confirmed the last 9 minutes had captured, cleanly saved the file, labeled it Day 4, 0553, Hollis termination, and started a new recording. He walked back to Lily's room and sat in the chair beside her bed. For a long moment, he didn't open the notebook. He just held the coffee still slightly too hot to drink properly, and he thought about a woman who had worked 11 years inside these walls and was now being walked carefully and deliberately toward the door for the act of telling a frightened family that help might be available. Not even that it was available, that it might be. The anger he felt was not the hot kind. It had never been that kind, not even at 23, when a job site boss had withheld overtime from 8 men who'd earned every hour of it. The anger he carried was denser than that, more patient, more directional. The kind that understands the difference between feeling something and being able to do something about it, and waits until the second thing becomes possible. He opened the notebook, wrote Patricia Hollis termination in progress, underneath it. Not if I get there first. He drew a single circle around both lines and moved on. By 8 o'clock, the floor was fully alive, shift change pulling energy through the hallways, morning rounds underway. The organized forward motion of a hospital switching between operational modes. He stepped outside Lily's room to give the morning nurse space to work, and that was when he saw her. The young mother from the billing window 2 days earlier was standing in the corridor outside the family waiting room, with her back pressed flat against the wall and both hands covering her face. She wasn't making a sound, but her shoulders were moving in the small, contained way that happens when someone is crying as quietly as they know how. Ethan walked over. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to be present, far enough to leave her room. Hey, he said. She dropped her hands fast. Her eyes were red, the skin around them tight. She looked at him with the automatic assessment of a stranger, and then the reflexive, practiced pull back toward composure that people develop when they've had to be strong in public for too long. I'm fine, she said. You don't have to be, he said. Something in the plainness of it, no performance, no softening, made her chin tremble for half a second before she got it back under control. My son is being discharged today, she said, that's great. It's good news, but they won't release him until we settle the deposit on the room, and I've been asking since yesterday about a payment arrangement, and they keep telling me the only person who handles that is in on Thursdays. She stopped, looked at the floor, then up at him. It's Wednesday, she said. The word landed like a door closing. He was quiet for a moment, not filling the silence, just letting it exist. What's your son's name? He asked. She blinked. The question had surprised her. She'd been braced for something practical, procedural. Marcus. How old? 8. A small sound that wasn't quite a laugh. He's 8 years old, and he gets to go home today, and I am standing in this hallway because I cannot figure out how to get him out of a room that I already paid for every day he was in it. Diana, Ethan said. He remembered her name from 2 days ago at the billing window. She noticed that he remembered. He could see it register. Go back to that window, he said. Ask to speak with the floor supervisor. Not billing, not the Thursday administrator. The floor supervisor specifically. Tell them you are requesting a discharge hold under patient financial hardship protocol. Those exact words. She stared at him. Is that a real policy? It should be, he said. Say it anyway. And if they tell you that protocol doesn't exist, ask them to put that in writing with a supervisor's signature. She studied him for a long moment with the focused, quiet scrutiny of a woman who has learned to identify which offers come with strings. Why are you helping me? She said. He met her eyes. Because you shouldn't have to stand in a hallway crying on the day your kid gets to go home. She was quiet for 2 full seconds. Then she straightened her back, wiped her face once with the back of her wrist, looked at him with something that wasn't quite gratitude yet, but was moving toward it, and said, Okay. Okay, he said. He watched her walk toward the elevator. Then he stepped into the family waiting room and made a call. 2 minutes. It took 2 minutes on the phone with his attorney to add a single line to the growing list of immediate operational changes to be enacted upon transfer of ownership. Financial assistance programs. Rebuilt from zero. Fully operational within 60 days of transition. He wanted it running before the paint dried on anything else. Understood, his attorney said and moved on. Ethan hung up and went back inside. 20 minutes later, Patricia Hollis came around the corner at a pace he hadn't seen from her all week. She stopped when she saw him outside the waiting room, looked at the door behind him, back at him. Did you say something to administration about the Reyes family? She said. I suggested a protocol, he said. That's all. Which protocol? The one that should exist here. She looked at him the way someone looks at a card they don't recognize in a deck they've handled for years. Then something shifted, a reluctant and almost involuntary recalibration. They're releasing Marcus Reyes this afternoon, she said. Full discharge. Balance deferred to a payment arrangement. Good, Ethan said. That doesn't happen here, she said. Flat, factual, no particular emotion around it. Just the statement of someone who has cataloged the way things work in a particular place and knows exactly what the catalog contains. It happened today, he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her making a calculation, not about him exactly, but about whether it was safe to say the thing she was holding. She decided to say it. Harmon has been watching you since day 2, she said. He's brought you up in 2 staff meetings. He's had security documenting your movements in the common areas. She paused. He's building a case to remove you formally. Ethan absorbed this without visible reaction. I appreciate you telling me, he said. I'm not telling you to help you. Quick. Certain. Like she needed that to be clear. I'm telling you because I have watched this man push out every person in this building who tries to do things right for years, and I am tired in a way I cannot describe anymore. She pressed her lips together. Just watch yourself. She walked away. He sat back down in the waiting room. He looked at what he'd written. Then he took out his phone and sent his attorney 3 words. Accelerate the close. The reply came in 8 minutes Thursday. 11 a.m., all parties confirmed. Tomorrow at 11 in the morning. He put the phone in his pocket, went to check on Lily. She was sitting up in bed with a drawing she'd made on the back of a food tray menu, a house, a tree beside it, a large, shapeless animal in the yard, and 2 stick figures standing in front of the door. She handed it to him without preamble, the way children offer things they've made, which is to say, with complete confidence, that it belongs in the recipient's hands. That's us, she said, and that's Biscuit. We don't have a dog named Biscuit, Ethan said. Not yet, she said. He examined the drawing. Stick figure Ethan wore an enormous hat of unclear shape and origin. Stick figure Lily held what appeared to be a star. The dog named Biscuit had 6 legs, which he chose not to address. When do I go home? She asked. Tomorrow or the day after. Dr. Webb wants to see one more good day. She absorbed this. The slight disappointment moved across her face and settled. Can we get Biscuit when we get home? We can discuss Biscuit when you're back on 2 feet. That means no. That means discuss. She looked at him. He looked at her. This was not their first negotiation and would not be their last, and neither of them had any illusions about who was more stubborn in this particular family. Fine, she said. Discuss. He reached over and pressed his palm gently to her forehead. Still cool. Still normal. He held it there for a beat longer than necessary because some habits you keep even after they're no longer urgent. She remembered my name the second day, Lily said. She meant Dr. Webb. She's good at her job, he said. She's good at her job and at being a person, Lily said. You can tell the difference. He looked at his daughter. There were moments when she said things with such unhurried, uncomplicated clarity that it stopped him completely. Yeah, he said. You can. He was still turning that over when he heard the door push open behind him and looked up and found Richard Harmon standing in the doorway of Lily's room. Ethan was on his feet before the thought completed itself. Not aggressive. Not rushing. Just upright and positioned between Harmon and the bed, the way a father's body moves when it calculates faster than the mind can form words. Harmon looked at him. Looked at Lily. Looked back at him. Mr. Carter, I need a word. Step out, Ethan said. Not a question. Harmon stepped back into the corridor. Ethan followed, pulled the door nearly closed behind him, and turned. You have been in this facility for 4 days, Harmon said. Dr. Webb's authorization covers your daughter's room. It does not extend to unrestricted use of staff corridors, administrative spaces, or family waiting areas. I've used common areas available to all visitors, Ethan said. You have been engaging hospital employees in extended personal conversations. You have inserted yourself into patient-adjacent interactions that are outside the purview of a visitor. I have spoken with nurses during the natural gaps between their duties, Ethan said. I have been polite. I have not disrupted a single shift, raised my voice, or caused a single documented incident. He held Harmon's gaze steadily. What specifically has been violated? Tell me the policy. I'll read it right now. Harmon looked at him with the cold patience of a man who is accustomed to being the ceiling in any room he enters. This hospital isn't yours, Harmon said. Quiet. Deliberate. Each word placed with intention, the intention of reduction. Ethan stood very still. In that moment, he could have said 3 sentences that would have ended the whole performance entirely. He could have watched the realization travel across Richard Harmon's face the way he had watched it travel across other faces, in other buildings, when the inventory of assumptions finally collapsed. But not yet. Take care of my daughter, Ethan said. That's all I'm asking. He went back inside. Lily was watching the door. Who was that? Someone from administration, Ethan said. He sat down. He looked at you the weird way, she said. The weird way, he repeated. Like you're not supposed to be here. She said it without distress, just the observation of a child who notices what adults notice and also notices that adults often pretend they don't. People do that sometimes. They do, he said. Does it bother you? He thought about this honestly. Not anymore, he said. It used to. What changed? He looked at his daughter. 7 years old and already asking the questions that most adults spend their whole lives avoiding. I figured out that how someone sees you and what you actually are 2 completely different things, he said. And only one of them is yours to carry. She thought about this the way she thought about things that were genuinely new to her, seriously, without rushing. Then she picked up her drawing and handed it to him again. He folded it in quarters and put it in his jacket pocket beside the notebook. At 4 in the afternoon, Diana Reyes appeared in the corridor outside room 307. She had Marcus with her. He was walking under his own power, in his own clothes, no longer attached to anything, and he had the careful, conserving stride of a kid who has been sick and knows it, but is not going to make that visible if he can help it. Compact and serious-faced, with his mother's same quality of composure, worn like something earned. Diana stopped in front of Ethan. We're going home, she said. I can see that, he said. She looked at him for a moment. What moved across her face was not easy emotion. It was the genuine kind exhaustion and relief, and something that hadn't fully found its shape yet, arriving at the same moment. Thank you, she said. He looked at Marcus. Good to be heading out. The boy looked at him with the frank, unhurried assessment of healthy 8-year-olds who haven't learned yet to manage their own curiosity. "Yeah," he said. Diana put her hand on her son's shoulder. She looked at Ethan once more before she turned toward the elevator. He raised one hand. She was already moving. He went back inside and sat beside Lily. His phone vibrated 40 minutes later. His attorney. He stepped into the hallway and took the call. "There is something you should know before tomorrow morning," his attorney said. "We've confirmed that Harmon received a formal briefing from one of the board members last month. He was told to expect due diligence from an outside buyer, a quiet visit, discreet observation." A pause. He apparently dismissed it. Ethan was very still. "What exactly did he say?" he asked. "He told the board member, and I am reading this from the email directly, that any serious investor would come through proper channels, that there was no reason to expect an unannounced personal visit from a legitimate buyer, and that if someone showed up wandering the facility without introducing themselves to leadership, they were probably not the person the board was anticipating." Silence on the corridor. "He was given the information," Ethan said. "He was given the information," his attorney confirmed. "The description matched your usual approach. Direct observation, incognito review. The board member knew your reputation." "But Harmon looked at me and saw—" "Exactly what he expected to see," his attorney said. "Yes." Ethan stood in the hospital corridor at 4:45 in the afternoon and let that land fully. Richard Harmon had been warned that an investor was coming. He had been given a description of how that investor operated. And he had looked at Ethan Carter at the old jeans, the work boots, the faded backpack, the sick child in his arms, and had concluded with complete confidence that this was not that person. Because that person would come through proper channels. Because that person would not be sitting in a waiting room chair. 11 a.m. tomorrow, Ethan said. "We'll need you at the office by 10:30, his attorney said. "Everything is prepared." He hung up. He stood alone in the corridor for a long moment, and he thought about what it meant that Richard Harmon had been handed the information and had filed it under impossible, and had then spent 4 days watching documenting pressuring, and attempting to remove the exact person he'd been told was coming. Then, he went back into the room. The evening nurse came at 6. At 7:30, Lily fell asleep mid-sentence, in a story she was telling him about something that had happened at her school before she got sick. He sat beside her in the quiet and the low light, and he wrote. At 8:08, Patricia Hollis came to the door. She looked at Lily, then at him. She stepped just inside the frame, keeping her voice low. "Third write-up was issued at 3 o'clock today," she said. "I know," he said. She looked at him. Something moved in her face, not quite the expression of defeat, but close enough that it would have read that way to someone who didn't know how to look. 11 years, Ethan said. She looked at him. 11 years you've been here, he said, and you're still the person who walks up to a stranger in a waiting room and tells them to watch themselves. You're still the person who tells families about programs that, he caught himself, about what they might be entitled to, even with 2 write-ups on your file, even knowing what it costs you. He paused. That matters, more than you know right now. She stood in the doorway looking at him with an expression he couldn't entirely read, something between confusion and a kind of careful withheld hope. The look of someone who has learned not to trust good news too early. I don't know who you are, Mr. Carter, she said. You will, he said. She was quiet for a full 5 seconds. Then she said, good night, and she was gone. He sat in the room alone, and he thought about what he was going to say Thursday morning. Not to the board, not to the attorneys, to the staff. The nurses and aides and orderlies who showed up every morning inside a system that measured them by their productivity and didn't see them as people. He thought about what he needed to say to make it real, not just corrective, not just the new management speech, but something actual. Something that acknowledged what they had carried inside this building before he arrived and what it had cost them. He thought about Patricia Hollis pressing a chart against her chest in a corridor, while a man stood too close and used his position like a tool. He thought about Diana Reyes, with her hands over her face outside the waiting room. He thought about an elderly veteran walking out through the front entrance and thanking a woman at a desk who never looked up. He thought about Dr. Webb coming down to Lily's eye level without thinking about it, just doing it reflexively, naturally. The way you do when you've made the same choice so many times it has become part of who you are. He fell asleep, sometime before 10 with his notebook in his lap and Lily's drawing folded in his pocket. When he woke at 1 in the morning, pulled upward by a briefly triggered monitor somewhere along the hall that fell silent. Before he was fully conscious, the first clear thought that reached him before he even knew where he was, before he had his bearings or his context back, was simply, one more day. He looked at Lily in the dark. She was sleeping, her hand open near her face, her breathing slow and steady and completely her own. 4 days of fear compressed into nothing by the simple fact of that even quiet rhythm. He looked at the ceiling. He thought, make it worth what it costs them, every single one of them. Make this building actually worth what they've given to it. And then he let the last night pass. He was awake at 4:43, not pulled out of sleep by noise or by worry. He simply opened his eyes in the dark and was fully present the way he always was on the mornings when something large was about to move. His body had always done this, calibrated itself to the weight of what was coming without needing to be told. He lay still for a moment and listened to Lily breathe. The room was quiet. The monitor a soft, even glow. The IV pole beside the bed was going to come out this morning. Dr. Webb had said so at evening rounds, confirmed discharge for Thursday, with the particular careful optimism that good doctors deploy when they mean it, but don't want you counting on it too hard. Everything was pointing the right direction. He sat up slowly in the fold-out chair, rolled his neck, and reached for the notebook that had been in his lap when he fell asleep. He found it on the floor beside the chair and held it in both hands in the dark without opening it. 17 days of documentation. No 4 days. It felt like 17. He thought about that. About how the density of what you witness compresses or expands time independent of the clock. 4 days inside St. Gabriel Medical Center had given him a more complete picture of this institution than any audit, any quarterly report, any board presentation ever would have. Because audits see what people prepare for them to see. And reports are written by people who understand what gets left out. What Ethan had seen was the thing that never made it into reports. He put the notebook in his jacket pocket beside Lily's folded drawing and got up to make coffee. By 6:30 the floor was in its morning rhythm, and he was standing in the corridor outside the room when Patricia Hollis came around the corner. She slowed when she saw him. Not the slowing of surprise, the slowing of someone who has thought about something overnight and needs one more look before they decide. "You're still here," she said. "Discharge is today," he said. "Afternoon?" She nodded. She was carrying a chart the way she always carried charts, held flat against her chest like a second skin. She started to move past, then stopped. "I pulled up my termination notice last night," she said. She didn't look at him when she said it, looked at a point somewhere past his left shoulder. "They have it written as a performance issue. 11 years of evaluations, all satisfactory or above, and they have it written as a performance issue." Ethan said nothing, just listened. "You said last night that I would know who you are," she said. "Soon." "Today," he said. She looked at him directly then. The same careful, withheld hope expression from the night before. Up close in the morning light, he could see exactly what 11 years inside this building had done to a face, not aged it exactly, but concentrated it. Refined it down to what mattered. There was nothing wasted in her expression. Every line and tension had been earned by something specific. "What time?" she asked. 11, he said. She studied him for another long second. Then she said with the flat, unadorned conviction of someone stating a thing they have decided to believe, because the alternative is to stop believing entirely. "Then I'm going to finish my shift." She walked away. He watched her go. Then he went back inside to be there when Lily woke up. She woke at 7:12. Her first question before she was fully out of sleep, before she'd even moved. Just eyes open, voice still carrying its overnight roughness was, "Is today the day?" "Today might be the day," he said. "Dr. Webb will decide." She sat up. She looked at her hand with the IV, then at him. "Can I have pancakes at home?" "You can have whatever you want at home." She processed this with the focus of someone mentally drafting a very specific list. "Pancakes," she said, "with the blueberries, and biscuit." "Lily." "I'm just saying both things." "I know you are." She grinned at him. Full and unhesitating, the grin of a kid who has been sick and knows she's getting better and is allowing herself to feel exactly how good that is. He felt it move through his chest, the way things do when they matter past the point of words. Dr. Webb arrived at 8:10. She came in with the morning's chart and went straight to Lily, performed the examination with the same unhurried precision he'd watched all week, listening, asking, pressing gently, watching Lily's face for what it revealed. Lily submitted to all of it with the resigned patience of someone who has made her peace with the morning routine. "Temperature," Dr. Webb said to the overnight chart. 98.4 since yesterday evening, Ethan said. She nodded, made a mark, looked at Lily. "How's the stomach?" "Better," Lily said. "Can I take this out?" She raised her hand with the IV line. "That Dr. Webb said is exactly what I'm here about." She sat back, looked at Ethan the way she'd looked at him the very first day, direct, unhedged, no performance. "She's doing well. Fluids are where I want them. Fever is resolved. Vitals are solid. I'm comfortable with discharge today. We'll plan for noon, gives us time to get the paperwork finalized and make sure everything's in order." Noon. He looked at his watch without thinking about it. 11 a.m. was his appointment. The signing of the finalized transfer documents at his attorney's office, 6 blocks away. 30 minutes to get there from the hospital. 30 minutes back. He'd be here by 12:15 at the latest. He could do this. "That works," he said. Dr. Webb looked at him with a kind of careful attention, the way she sometimes had this week, not clinical, something else. "Are you all right?" she said. The question caught him genuinely off guard. He looked at her. "I've watched you sit in that chair for 4 days." She said quiet enough that Lily, who was already picking at the edge of the medical tape around her IV in speculative fashion, couldn't fully hear. "You haven't complained once. You haven't had anyone else with you. You've dealt with—" She paused, chose her words. "A certain amount of friction from administration, and you've just sat here." "I'm fine," he said. "I know you are," she said. "I'm asking anyway." She stood. "You've been a good advocate for her. Some parents fall apart in here, some get angry with staff because they can't get angry with the disease. You just—" She tilted her head slightly, searching for it. "You just stayed present." She noticed. Kids always notice. He didn't know what to say. He didn't say anything. She picked up the chart. At the door she paused once more, the way she sometimes did, not theatrically. Just the honest pause of a person who thinks before they stop thinking and move. "Whoever you are outside this building, Mr. Carter," she said, "whatever you do, I hope it's something that lets you keep being this present." She looked at Lily. "She's lucky to have you." She was gone before he could find the response. He stood in the room and felt the full weight of what she didn't know and what she'd said anyway, and he thought that whatever else he did in the next 24 hours, she needed to know that it was people exactly like her who had made any of it worth doing. By 9:30, Lily's IV was out. Her hand was bandaged with a small gauze square that she regarded with considerable pride, and she was dressed in her own clothes for the first time in 4 days. She sat on the edge of the bed, kicking her feet and watching cartoons and eating the breakfast tray with the focused commitment of someone who has re-established her relationship with food and is not taking it for granted. Ethan stepped into the corridor at 9:45 and called his attorney. "Everything's confirmed," his attorney said. "Conference room B, 10:55 to give us a few minutes before the hour. Full board representation, legal witnesses, the transfer agreement, and the operational protocols we drafted." "Patricia Hollis's termination notice," Ethan said. "I need that voided as a condition of the closing, written explicitly into the supplemental agreements before I sign." A pause, brief. His attorney had worked with him long enough to absorb mid-morning curveballs without breaking stride. "I can have that language drafted in 20 minutes, she said. "Do it." "Anything else?" He thought about the billing window. The mother with the shaking hands. The veteran who walked out thanking a woman who never looked up. The 4-year-old on a ventilator whose parents had been told that help wasn't available by a man who had made that decision while celebrating quarterly profits in the cafeteria 1 floor down. The financial assistance program, he said. Fully staffed, operational within 60 days. I want that in the agreement as a binding operational requirement, not a recommendation. Breach of that timeline triggers a penalty payable directly to a patient assistance fund. Another pause, this one longer. "Ethan," his attorney said. And when she used his first name, it usually meant she was deciding whether to say the practical thing or the thing that was actually worth saying. She chose the second one. "I want you to know that the due diligence on this place has been one of the more dispiriting projects of my career. What you're doing matters." "Get me Hollis's notice voided," he said. "I'll be there at 10:50. He hung up, checked his watch. 1 hour and 5 minutes. He went back inside to stay with Lily until it was time to go. She looked up from her cartoons when he came in. Rate him the way she sometimes did that uncanny, unguarded perception. "You have to go somewhere," she said. "For a little while," he said. "A nurse will be here. I'll be back before noon." "For the discharge?" "For the discharge. I won't miss it." She studied him. "Is it important where you're going?" He looked at his daughter. "Yes," he said. She turned back to her cartoons. "Okay," she said. Simple and absolute the way she trusted him. The easiness of it always went straight through him. He kissed the top of her head. She leaned into it briefly, still watching the screen, and then he put on his jacket and walked out into the corridor. He was halfway down the hall when he heard it. Richard Harmon's voice carrying from the direction of the elevator bank, speaking into a phone, not shouting, but not troubled by who might be listening either. "I'm telling you, James, if the board is serious about a buyer with Westland's profile, they're not sending someone who looks like he sleeps in his car. Run the name again, Carter Ethan. I've got our security team's full documentation on him for 4 days, and there is nothing there. He's a parent with a sick kid and absolutely nothing else." Ethan stopped walking. The kind of money we're talking about doesn't walk into a hospital lobby in work boots and sit in a waiting room for 4 days without identifying himself to anyone. Harmon continued. "It doesn't work that way." A pause as the other person spoke. "I'm not concerned," Harmon said. And the certainty in his voice unshaken, unreachable, the certainty of a man who has never had to question the machinery of his own assumptions, filled the corridor completely. "Have someone pull his public records. You'll see. There's nothing there." He hung up. Ethan stood where he was. He had known this. His attorney had told him yesterday. He had processed it. He had understood it intellectually, had turned it over, had written it in the notebook. But hearing it right now, 10 minutes before he was going to walk out of this building and sign his name to the documents that would make everything Harmon had just said irrelevant, it landed differently. Not painfully. Not angrily. Just with the particular crystalline clarity of a thing understood all the way down. He had been in this building for 4 days. He had documented abuses spoken with staff who feared retaliation, watched a veteran walk out unseen, and a mother cry outside a waiting room. He had been repeatedly assessed, pressured, questioned, and told in words chosen deliberately for their weight that this hospital was not his. And Harmon had been given his name, had been told, had looked at the man in work boots and concluded not possible. Ethan exhaled once, slow and complete. Then he straightened his jacket, moved toward the elevator, and pressed the lobby button. He walked out of St. Gabriel Medical Center at 10:03 in the morning into a November that had gone cold and clear overnight, the kind of air that sharpens edges and carries sound farther than usual. He walked 6 blocks without hurrying, his hands in his pockets, the notebook against his ribs, Lily's folded drawing beside it. The signing took 40 minutes. He sat at a long table in his attorney's conference room with 5 other people, all of them in clothes that cost several times what his did, and he read each document with the same precise attention. He gave everything, and he signed where indicated, and he asked 3 clarifying questions about the Hollis provision and the assistance program timeline, and when all of it was finalized and dated and witnessed, he thanked everyone, put on his jacket, and left. He was back outside St. Gabriel by 11:58. He pushed through the front entrance at 11:59, walked past the front desk without stopping, and took the elevator upstairs to get Lily. He did not see Harmon on the way in. Dr. Webb was in Lily's room when he arrived, going over the discharge paperwork. Lily was already standing beside the bed with her backpack on, not packed neatly, just stuffed, one sleeve of a sweatshirt hanging out of the zipper, her blanket with the cartoon horses rolled under her arm like she'd carried it in from the car herself. 12:02, Lily said when he walked in. I thought you said noon. It's 12:02, he said. That's afternoon. By 2 minutes. She considered this. Fine, she said. Dr. Webb smiled, the real one, the kind she rationed, the kind you noticed when you got it. Discharge instructions. She handed him a folder. Nothing heavy for 48 hours. Full diet is tolerated. Follow up with her primary in 10 to 14 days. And... She paused, and there was something in the pause, something more than clinical. She's a remarkable kid, Mr. Carter. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. He held out his hand. She shook it with the same directness she'd shown him the first morning. He wanted to say something. He wasn't yet ready to say it. But he made a note to himself about what he owed this woman, and it wasn't money, and it wasn't a title, though those things were coming. It was the harder thing, the acknowledgement. He picked up the backpack and held his hand out for Lily. They went down in this elevator together, and he felt the specific relief of someone who has been carrying something very heavy for a long time, and is 10 steps from being able to put it down. The lobby was busy at noon. The natural congregating hour, discharge clusters, new arrivals, families and visitors crossing each other's trajectories, the organized human traffic of a mid-size hospital at lunchtime. Ethan and Lily stepped out of the elevator. He saw Harmon before Harmon saw him. The administrator was standing near the far end of the reception desk with 2 staff members and a security guard, speaking in the low, efficient tone of someone managing something. He glanced up as the elevator doors opened, routine, habitual, and his eyes landed on Ethan. Something moved in his face. The calculation of a man who has spent 4 days building a case, deciding whether to deploy it. He made the decision. He moved, Mr. Carter. His voice carried enough to turn heads without obviously trying to. He was already gesturing to the security guard as he walked. I need a word. Ethan kept walking, Lily's hand in his, moving toward the exit at a normal pace. Mr. Carter. Louder now. The second call, the one designed to make other people look, to make the subject of it feel the weight of collective attention. People turned. The lobby's noise lowered slightly in the unconscious way it does when something displaces the ambient texture of a space. Ethan stopped. He turned slowly. He looked at Harmon approaching with the guard beside him, and he looked at the faces of the people looking at them both. Patients in chairs, visitors at the desk, a pair of nurses who had paused near the corridor. He felt Lily's hand tighten in his. He squeezed back once. Steadying. You are being formally asked to leave this facility, Harmon said. He was 5 feet away, the guard half a step behind him. His voice was controlled, but the control was working hard. We have a right to refuse service to individuals who disrupt hospital operations, and your conduct over the past 4 days has been... My daughter has just been discharged, Ethan said. Quiet, level. We're leaving. I'm asking you to leave now via the direction of security. We're walking to the door. You've been using this facility for reasons other than... My daughter was a patient here, Ethan said. Still quiet. Still completely still. She's been discharged with Dr. Webb's authorization. We are walking to the door. Harmon looked at the guard. The guard stepped forward and put his hand on Ethan's arm. Not grabbing, not rough, but touching. Contact. The physical language of removal. Lily made a sound beside him. Not quite a word. the sound a child makes when something frightening happens faster than they can form a response. "Dad," she said, and that one syllable, small and startled, Lily's voice tightening around the word that meant everything to her, cut through every other thing in the room. Every head turned. Harmon pointed toward the door. "Get him out," he said. And this was the choice. This was the moment he could have stopped and did not. He raised his voice to the full lobby and said, "This hospital isn't yours. It never was. Get out." The room was very quiet. Patricia Hollis had come down for her break. She was standing at the edge of the corridor, chart pressed to her chest, frozen, watching. 2 other nurses near the reception desk had stopped moving. 3 visitors who had been waiting in the chair section were now watching in complete silence. The security guard's hand was still on Ethan's arm. Lily was looking up at her father with an expression that was trying very hard not to be afraid. Trying the way children try when they have decided to trust the adult they love to make the bad things stop. And Ethan Carter looked at his daughter, and then looked at Richard Harmon, and then looked at the room, at every person in it, at the weight and the silence, and the collective held breath of a dozen people watching a man use his position to do exactly what position like his should never be used to do. He thought about whether this was the moment. He thought about the veteran who walked out thanking a woman who never saw him. He thought about the 4-year-old on a ventilator, and the parents who'd been told compassion doesn't appear on a quarterly report. He thought about Patricia Hollis and her 11 years and her termination notice sitting in an HR file with "performance issue" written at the top. He made his decision. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out, not the notebook, not the phone, a single folded document. His attorney had pressed it into his hands as he was leaving the conference room. "Just in case," she'd said in the dry, professionally prepared way she said most things. He unfolded it. He held it so Harmon could see it. It was 2 pages. Clean legal formatting. At the top of the first page, in the unambiguous language of completed corporate transfer, his name appeared twice in the first paragraph as the majority shareholder and controlling owner of the entity formally operating as St. Gabriel Medical Center, effective this date. Harmon looked at it. His face didn't go pale. It didn't do anything dramatic. It did something more unsettling than that. It simply stopped. The way a moving thing stops. All the machinery behind the expression ceased operating for a full visible second. "You work for me," Ethan said. He said it quietly. Not loudly, not for the room. He said it the same way he said everything, calmly, directly to the exact person it was meant for. "You have worked for me," he continued, "since 11 a.m. this morning, and you've been recording yourself doing it for 4 days. He held the guard's gaze. The guard released his arm. Silence in the lobby. Complete. The kind of silence that doesn't happen by accident, that happens because every person in a space has made the simultaneous decision to stop generating noise. Patricia Hollis at the edge of the corridor was completely still, chart pressed to her chest, eyes wide. One of the board members, Ethan, recognized him from the donor photos. Robert Whitfield, who had been part of the closing at 11 this morning, came out of the elevator at that exact moment and stopped 3 feet from the doors. Whitfield looked at Harmon, at Ethan, at the document in Ethan's hand. He closed his eyes briefly, the expression of a man who realizes he is looking at the exact scenario he had been warned about several weeks earlier, now fully in motion, and that there is nothing left to do but stand here and let it complete itself. "Richard," Whitfield said. Harmon didn't look at him. He was still looking at the document, then at Ethan's face. And what moved across his expression in that slow, visible way was not the shock of information. The information had landed. What hand? He closed his eyes briefly, the expression of a man who realizes he is looking at the exact scenario he had been warned about several weeks earlier, now fully in motion, and that there is nothing left to do but stand here and let it complete itself. "Richard," Whitfield said. Harmon didn't look at him. He was still looking at the document, then at Ethan's face. And what moved across his expression in that slow, visible way was not the shock of information. The information had landed. What was moving now was the full comprehension of the context. The sequence. 4 days. The lobby chair. The work boots. The faded backpack. The security checks and the file he'd built, and the call he'd made that morning. Nothing there have someone run his records and the specific sentence he'd spoken into a phone 11 minutes before this man walked out of the building, signed his name, and walked back in. Harmon understood now that Ethan had been in the corridor when he said it. The color that left his face did so slowly, the way something large shifts when the load it's been carrying is suddenly redistributed. "You heard that," Harmon said. It wasn't a question. "I recorded it," Ethan said. Another silence. Briefer but denser. "I want to be clear about something," Ethan said, and now his voice was for the room as much as for the man in front of him, for Patricia Hollis at the corridor's edge, for the nurses at the desk, for the visitors in their chairs, for his daughter standing beside him, holding the cartoon horse blanket under one arm, and watching her father with an expression that was trying to hold everything. It was feeling at once and almost succeeding. "I'm not here to make an announcement. I'm here to take my daughter home." He looked at Lily, the real unguarded look he gave her in private, the look that meant what it meant. "But there are people in this building who have been treated in ways that are about to change. And I wanted them to know that it's already done. It happened at 11 this morning. It's already done." He refolded the document, put it back in his pocket. He looked at Harmon one final time. "Don't clear out your office," he said. "We have things to discuss." He picked up Lily's backpack from where it had slid off her shoulder, took her hand, and walked toward the doors. Behind him, the lobby stayed quiet for a long, dense moment, the collective processing of a dozen people recalibrating everything they had watched over the last 10 minutes. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could hear it, the quality of the silence changing from held breath to something else. Something that happens in rooms when something long compressed finally finds a way to move. Outside, the November air hit them both. Lily walked beside him toward the parking structure, matching his pace the way she always did, her blanket tucked under her arm. She was quiet for half a block. He let her be. Then she said, "Dad." "Yeah." "Did you just buy that hospital?" He looked down at her. She was watching the sidewalk ahead of them, with a face that was working through something carefully. "Yes," he said. She was quiet for another 20 steps. "Is that why you kept writing in the little notebook?" "Yes." Another silence, shorter. "Is that why Mr. Harmon was so mean to you?" "He was mean to me," Ethan said carefully. "Because he looked at me and decided he knew who I was." "Because of what you look like." "Because of what I look like," he said. "Yes." She thought about this. He watched her face doing the work it always did. Not skimming the surface of a thing, but going down into it, the way she went into everything. "That's dumb," she said. "It is," he said. "He's not going to work there anymore." "I don't know yet. That depends on whether he's willing to do some things differently." She looked up at him sideways, with the Lily look, the look that said she had formed an opinion and was deciding how direct to be about it. "I don't think he will be," she said. He almost smiled. "Why not?" "Because he's the kind of person who thinks he's right," she said. "And you can't do things differently if you think you were right." He stopped walking. He looked at his 7-year-old daughter standing on a sidewalk outside a hospital, holding a cartoon horse blanket. She looked back at him. "What?" How he said, "Are you 7 years old?" She shrugged. "Can we get biscuit today?" "Lily." "I'm just asking." He started walking again. She fell into step beside him. After another moment, she reached up and took his hand without saying anything about it, just closed her fingers around his, and kept walking, and he held on, and they walked to the car together. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. Lily was in the back, already pulling the cartoon blanket around herself, with the practiced efficiency of someone who has spent 4 days perfecting the arrangement. He looked at the building through the windshield. 5 floors. Gray stone and glass in the November light. From the outside, it looked exactly like what it was, which was a hospital. But hospitals were not their buildings. They were the people inside them, and the choices those people made in the 10,000 small moments that didn't get witnessed or recorded. They were Patricia Hollis, pressing a chart to her chest and choosing to tell a stranger to watch himself, even when she had everything to lose. They were Dr. Webb, coming down to a 7-year-old's eye level without thinking about it. They were Diana Reyes, straightening her back in a corridor on the day her son got to go home. He thought about all of it. About what it was going to take to rebuild the thing that had been allowed to break in here incrementally over years. About the meetings he was going to have in that building tomorrow and the day after and every day for months. About what he needed to say to the people who had stayed inside it and kept doing their jobs right, while the institution around them moved in the wrong direction. He thought about Patricia Hollis's face in the lobby corridor, frozen chart pressed to her chest, watching. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed his attorney. "It's done," he said when she picked up. "The Hollis provision is activated effective today. Termination notice voided. I want that on paper and in her hands before end of business." "I'll have it delivered to the hospital within the hour," his attorney said. "One more thing. I want a meeting set in the building tomorrow at 8 a.m. with the following people: Dr. Caroline Webb, Patricia Hollis, and every department lead who has been with the institution for 5 years or longer." "Should I have administration prepare a briefing?" "No administration," he said. "No briefing. No PowerPoint. I'll talk to them myself." A pause. "What do you want me to put on the meeting invite?" He thought about it. Put new ownership. First conversation. He hung up, put the phone away, started the car. "Dad," Lily said from the back seat. "Yeah, I really do want pancakes." He checked the mirror. She was looking at him with the expression she deployed when she was trying to look reasonable, which she'd been doing since she was 4 years old, and which never once succeeded in hiding the absolute determination underneath it. "Pancakes," he said. "Then home. And biscuit." "Lily." "One day," she said. "Not today. Just one day." He drove out of the parking structure and into the November light. Behind him, St. Gabriel Medical Center sat in the same place it had always sat, identical from the outside to what it had been that morning when Ethan had walked back in through the front doors. But inside it, something had shifted. Not all the way yet. Not completely. The work was just beginning, and he knew better than most people how long the real work took. Not the signing, not the announcements, not the press release. His attorney was already quietly drafting, but the actual work of rebuilding a place from the inside out, of restoring the thing that makes an institution worth the trust people bring to it when they are at their most frightened and their most vulnerable, that work was going to take time. And honesty. And the willingness to sit with people who had been ground down by a system that measured them incorrectly, and to say out loud what they had been worth all along. He was ready for that. He'd been getting ready for it for 4 days, in a fold-out chair, with a green notebook in his jacket pocket, and a sick kid in the room down the hall, watching a place show him who it was when it thought no one important was looking. He'd been ready for a long time. He pulled into the St. Gabriel parking structure at 7-Eleven the next morning, and for the first time in 5 days, he parked in a space that wasn't marked for visitors. He sat in the truck for a moment with the engine off. Lily was at her Aunt Rachel's for the day she had gone reluctantly negotiating for a full 10 minutes about whether a person who was medically cleared for a full diet should also be medically cleared to accompany her father to work, and had ultimately been defeated by the argument that the meeting was going to be extremely boring. She had accepted this the way she accepted all lost arguments, which was to say, by immediately opening a second front about the dog. He picked up the green notebook from the passenger seat and looked at it. 17 pages. Names and times and quotes. A veteran who waited 4 hours and 11 minutes. A woman with shaking hands at a billing window. A nurse who pressed a chart against her chest in a corridor while a man stood too close to her and told her that a 4-year-old's parents should have planned better. He was about to walk into a building where every single one of those people worked, and every one of them now knew who he was. He got out of the truck. He walked through the front doors at 7:19, and the difference was immediate and total. The woman at the reception desk, the same woman who had looked at his jacket and his boots 5 days earlier and told him to have a seat, saw him and stood up. Physically stood up. Her hand went to her headset, then dropped, then went back up, and she said, "Mr. Carter? Good morning, sir. Do you need—" "Good morning," he said. He stopped at the desk. "What's your name?" She blinked. "Denise?" "Denise. I'm Ethan." He held out his hand. She looked at it for a full second before she took it. Her grip was uncertain, the handshake of someone who is not sure what the rules are anymore and is afraid of getting them wrong. "I owe you an apology," she said fast, the words coming out with the pressure of something she'd been rehearsing since yesterday afternoon. "The first day, when you came in, I made you wait when your daughter was— Denise." She stopped. "You processed 100 people that day," he said. "You did what you were trained to do inside a building that trained you to do it. That's not on you." He paused. "But if it ever happens again now, you'll know it doesn't have to." She stared at him. Something moved in her face, and she pressed her lips together hard. "Yes, sir," she said. "Ethan," he said. He walked to the elevator. The conference room on the 4th floor was full by 7:52. He knew this because he stood outside it for 3 minutes and listened. There were 18 people in that room. Department leads, senior nurses, 2 physicians, the head of housekeeping, the head of food services, an orderly named Terrell, who had been at St. Gabriel for 19 years, and whose name Ethan had written in the notebook on day 3, after watching him walk an elderly patient to the bathroom, with a patience that couldn't be trained into a person. They were not talking much. What talking there was had the low compressed quality of people who don't know what's about to happen to them. He heard someone say, heard he was in the lobby for 4 days, and someone else say, my sister works at Mercy. They had a buyout in '98. Half the floor was gone in 6 weeks. He heard a woman say quietly, whatever happens, at least Harmon's gone. And another voice, flat, unconvinced, the voice of someone who has watched this cycle before, said, you don't know that. They never fire the ones at the top. They fire us and keep him. Ethan stood in the corridor and let that land. Then he opened the door and walked in. 18 people went silent at once. He looked at them. Patricia Hollis was in the 3rd row, chartless. For once, her hands folded in her lap. Dr. Webb was near the window with her reading glasses pushed up into her hair. Terrell was standing at the back because there weren't enough chairs, and he'd given his to someone else. Ethan didn't go to the front of the room. There was a small podium there and a screen behind it, and he walked right past both. He pulled a chair out from the table, turned it around, and sat down facing them at the same level. My name is Ethan Carter, he said. As of 11 o'clock yesterday morning, I own this hospital. Nobody moved. I want to start by telling you what I'm not going to do, he said. I'm not going to give you a speech. I don't have slides. I'm not going to tell you about my vision or my values or a 5-year strategic plan, because you've all heard that before from people who didn't mean it, and I'm not going to insult you by adding to the pile. Silence. What I'm going to do, he said, is tell you what I saw. He took out the notebook. 5 days ago, I walked into this building with my 7-year-old daughter. She had a fever of 103, and I didn't know what was wrong with her. I was terrified. I checked in at that front desk downstairs at 8:14 in the morning for an 8:30 appointment, and I was seen at 9:47. He looked around the room. That's not why I'm here, he said. Waiting rooms run late. Every one of you knows that. That's not the story. He opened the notebook. At 9:15, a security officer came to where I was sitting and asked me for my documentation. Appointment confirmation, insurance card, photo ID. He went through all of it, page by page, while I held my sick daughter in my lap. He looked up. There were 19 other people in that waiting room. Not one of them was asked for anything. Nobody said a word. On day 2, I watched an elderly man, a veteran you can always tell, sit in that lobby for 4 hours and 11 minutes. I timed it. During that same stretch, 3 people who came in through the side entrance were seen inside 30 minutes. He paused. He got up and left without being called. On his way out, he stopped and thanked the woman at the desk. He turned a page. She didn't look up. Somewhere in the room, someone exhaled. On day 2, I also watched a woman named Diana Reyes stand at the billing window with her hands shaking, trying to arrange a payment plan so she could take her 8-year-old son home. She was told the assistance program ran through a third party with a 3 to 4 week turnaround. She stood there for 5 more minutes, asking every version of the same question she could think of. He closed the notebook and held it in his lap. Then she walked away, holding papers she hadn't asked for. He looked at them. On day 3, I stood at the end of a second-floor corridor, and I listened to a member of this hospital's leadership tell a nurse with 11 years in this building that a family with a 4-year-old on a ventilator should have planned better. He heard the sound the room made, not a word, just 18 people reacting simultaneously. Patricia Hollis was completely still. And the night before that, Ethan said, I sat in the cafeteria and listened to the same man tell 3 donors that this hospital had phased out its financial assistance programs 2 years ago because the ROI wasn't there. His words. He said compassion doesn't appear on a quarterly report. Now there was a sound, a low one. Movement. 2 people looked at each other. I want to be direct with you about something, Ethan said. I didn't come into this building undercover to catch anybody. That's not what this was. When I'm evaluating an institution, I go in as myself, and myself is a guy who wears these boots and drives a truck with 200,000 miles on it. That's not a costume. That's just what I look like. He let that sit. But here's what happened, he said. Because of what I look like, this building showed me its actual face. Not the one it puts on for the board. Not the one in the annual report. The real one. He paused. And the real one is a place where the treatment you receive depends on what you're wearing. Nobody was moving. Now, he said. Here's the part I need you to hear. He leaned forward slightly. I sat in that lobby for 4 days. And in 4 days, the number of people in this building who treated me like a human being was not 0. He looked at Dr. Webb. On the first morning, a physician came into an exam room, put the chart face down before she did anything else, shook my hand, and then sat down on a stool so she'd be at my daughter's eye level. She asked Lily to shake her hand. She asked Lily where it hurt instead of asking me. And when she was done, she looked at me and said, "You did the right thing." Dr. Webb had gone very still by the window. I hadn't slept in 4 days, Ethan said. She noticed. She said she'd have someone bring me coffee. He looked at the room. That is the smallest thing in the world. That is nothing. That costs a hospital exactly nothing. He paused. And I wrote her name in this notebook, and I drew a circle around it because it was the first evidence I had that this place might still be worth saving. Dr. Webb pressed her hand briefly to her mouth and took it away again. On day 2, Ethan said, I asked a nurse where the vending machine was. She told me, and then she offered me her own quarters. I asked her how long she'd worked here. 11 years. I asked her if she liked it. He looked directly at Patricia Hollis. She thought about it for a long time, and then she said, I like my patients. Patricia Hollis's jaw tightened. 3 days later. Ethan said, that same nurse walked up to a stranger in a waiting room, a guy she thought was nobody, a guy she had every reason to keep her distance from, and told him that administration was building a case to have him removed. She told him to watch himself. He paused. She already had 2 write-ups. She knew exactly what it would cost her if the wrong person heard. She did it anyway. The room had turned. Every head. Yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock, Ethan said, her 3rd write-up was issued. HR had the termination documentation prepped. They wanted her out before the quarter closed. Patricia Hollis was looking straight ahead at nothing. 11 years of satisfactory or above evaluations, Ethan said, and they wrote it up as a performance issue. Someone in the second row said out loud, without meaning to, Jesus! That termination was voided at 11 o'clock yesterday morning as a written condition of the sale, Ethan said. Before I signed. It was the first thing I put in the agreement. Patricia Hollis closed her eyes. She didn't cry. He watched her not cry with the specific effort of a woman who has spent 11 years not crying in this building and was not going to start now in front of 18 colleagues. Her hands were flat on her knees, and her jaw was locked, and she just breathed. The woman beside her put a hand on her arm. "Patricia," Ethan said. She opened her eyes. "You're not being retained," he said. "You're being promoted. I want you as Director of Patient Advocacy. It's a position that doesn't exist in this building yet. You'd be building it from zero, and it would report directly to me, and its entire function would be to do the thing you've been getting written up for." The room made a sound. Patricia Hollis stared at him. "I don't," she started, stopped, started again. "I'm a floor nurse. You're the person who told a family about help that might exist when the building told you not to," he said. 3 times, knowing what it cost. I've read a lot of resumes. That's better than any of them. "I don't have a management background. I don't want a management background," Ethan said. "I want somebody who knows what it feels like to be standing in a corridor with no authority and no support, watching a family drown, and to do it anyway." He held her gaze. "You can say no. But I need you to actually think about it before you do." She sat there. Then she said quietly, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why me and not—" She gestured slightly, taking in the room. "There are people in here who've been doing this longer than me. There are people who—" "Because you're the one who warned a stranger," he said. "That's it. That's the whole reason. You had nothing to gain. You did it anyway. That's the only credential I care about." She looked down at her hands. "Then yes," she said. The room broke. Not into applause, nothing that clean. Just a release. A sound. Movement. Somebody said something and somebody else laughed, once the startled laugh of people who came into a room braced for layoffs. Ethan let it happen. Then he raised his hand slightly and it settled. "Dr. Webb," he said. She looked at him. "I want you on the executive medical board," he said. "Full seat, full vote. I want you in the room when the decisions get made because you're the person in this building who's demonstrated that she doesn't need a policy to tell her how to treat somebody." Dr. Webb was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I have to be honest with you." "Please." "I've been offered things before," she said. "By this hospital, promotions committee seats. Every one of them turned out to be a way to get me out of the exam rooms and into meetings where I had a title and no actual authority." She looked at him steadily. "If this is that I'd rather stay on the floor." The room went quiet again. Ethan looked at her. "That's a fair question," he said. "Here's my answer. The medical board's decisions are going to be binding on administration, not advisory. Binding. If the board says a protocol is clinically wrong, administration doesn't get to override it for financial reasons. That's going in the operating agreement this week." He paused. "And you keep your patients?" "Both. That's non-negotiable from my side, not yours." Dr. Webb studied him for a long, careful moment. "Then yes," she said. "Terrell," Ethan said. The man at the back of the room who had given his chair away looked up in genuine surprise. 19 years, Ethan said. "Yes, sir." "I watched you walk a woman to the bathroom on day 3, Ethan said. "Took you 11 minutes to go 40 feet. You didn't rush her once." Terrell didn't say anything. "I don't have a title for you yet," Ethan said. "I'm not going to insult you by inventing one on the spot, but I want to have a conversation with you this week about what 19 years in this building has taught you about how it actually works, because I guarantee you know things this room doesn't." Terrell nodded slowly. "I do," he said. "I figured," Ethan said. He stood up. "3 things," he said. "Then I'll let you get back to work." The room quieted. 1. Financial assistance is coming back. Fully staffed, operational within 60 days. It's a binding condition of the sale. If we miss that timeline, the penalty is payable directly into a patient assistance fund. I built the penalty in so nobody could talk me out of the deadline later, including me. Somebody said, 60 days. 60 days, Ethan said. 2. Nobody in this room is being terminated. Nobody in this building is being terminated as a result of the sale. There will be changes in leadership. There will not be a purge. I want you to go tell your floors that today, in those words, because I know exactly what everybody in this hospital thinks happens when a building gets bought, and I need it to stop being what they're thinking about at 3 in the morning. The sound the room made this time was different. 3. He paused. Every one of you has spent years inside a system that measured you incorrectly. It counted your productivity, and it did not count the 11 minutes it took Terrell to walk somebody 40 feet. It counted room bookings, and it did not count Dr. Webb sitting down on a stool. It wrote up Patricia Hollis 3 times for the single best thing she did in 11 years. He looked at all of them. You kept doing it right anyway, he said. Inside a building that punished you for it. I don't have a way to pay you back for that. I'm not going to pretend I do. But I want you to hear out loud from the person who now owns this place, I know what it cost you. And it was not invisible. Nobody spoke. Then Terrell at the back said quietly, 19 years. Yeah, Ethan said. 19 years and nobody ever said that. I know, Ethan said. That's why I said it first. He walked out at 8:41. Richard Harmon was waiting in the corridor. He had been standing there. Ethan could tell from his position for some part of it. Not all, but some. He looked like a man who had not slept. His tie was correct, and his shirt was pressed, and his hair was exactly as it had been every other day, and underneath all of it was something completely unfamiliar on that face, the total absence of the thing that had always been there. Mr. Carter? Richard, I'd like to speak with you. My office, Ethan said. 10 minutes. I don't know where your office is. Ethan stopped and looked at him. Neither do I, he said. 4th floor conference room. It'll do. At 8:52, Richard Harmon sat down across a conference table from the man he had ordered thrown out of a hospital lobby. He didn't sit the way he'd stood for the last 5 days. He sat carefully like a man who no longer trusted the furniture. I've prepared a resignation, he said. He put an envelope on the table. Effective immediately. I've made it clean. No severance claim, no dispute, no legal exposure for the institution. You'll have my cooperation on any transition matters. Ethan looked at the envelope. He didn't touch it. Why? He said. Harmon blinked. I think that's fairly obvious. Humor me. Harmon's jaw moved. Because I publicly humiliated the owner of this hospital in his own lobby in front of his child, and because you have 4 days of recordings, and because there is no version of this where I keep this job. That's not why, Ethan said. Harmon looked at him. That's the calculation, Ethan said. That's the exposure assessment. That's what you'd write in a memo. He leaned back. I asked why. Silence. You want me to say I was wrong, Harmon said. I don't want you to say anything, Ethan said. I want to know if you know. The silence went long. I was told, Harmon said finally. Last month. Whitfield told me an outside buyer might send someone. Quietly. Personally. He described how you operate. His voice was very flat. I read the email. I filed it. And then a man walked into my lobby in work boots carrying a sick kid, and I did not... He stopped. It did not occur to me. Not once. Not for 1 second in 4 days. No, Ethan said. It didn't. I ran your name yesterday morning, Harmon said. I told James there was nothing there. I know, Ethan said. I was standing in the corridor. Harmon closed his eyes. Here's what I want you to understand, Ethan said. You didn't miss it because you're stupid. You're not stupid. You missed it because your entire operating system runs on a single assumption that you can look at a person and know what they're worth. And you're so good at it, and it's worked for you for so long, that when the information contradicted it, you threw away the information and kept the assumption. He paused. You had my name. You had a description of exactly what I do. And you decided reality had made an error. Harmon didn't move. That's not a mistake you made with me, Ethan said. That's the mistake you make with everyone. I'm just the one who happened to be able to prove it. Yes, Harmon said. It came out of him strangely, not defiant, not broken, just yes. The veteran in the lobby, Ethan said. 4 hours and 11 minutes. I don't know who that is. No, Ethan said. You don't. Harmon looked at the table. Diana Reyes, Ethan said. Billing window, shaking hands. I don't. The 4-year-old on the ventilator. You told Patricia Hollis his parents should have planned better. Harmon's hands were flat on the table. He said nothing for a long moment. I remember that one, he said. Do you? Yes. Why that one? Harmon's throat moved. Because she cried, he said. Hollis, half a second. She caught it. And I remember thinking. He stopped. Say it. I remember thinking that she was being unprofessional, Harmon said. Ethan let that sit in the room. That's the whole thing, he said. Right there. That's the entire disease in one sentence. A woman is standing in a corridor breaking apart over a 4-year-old on a machine, and the thought that arrived in your head was that she was being unprofessional. He paused. You didn't even have to work at it. It just came. Harmon said nothing. Take your envelope, Ethan said. Harmon looked up. I'm not accepting it, Ethan said. I don't understand. I know you don't. Ethan leaned forward. Here's the situation, he said. I could accept that resignation right now. You'd walk out of here at 9 in the morning, and by noon, you'd have 3 calls out to people in your network. And inside 6 months, you'd be running a facility in another state. And you would do the exact same thing there. To different nurses, different families, different veterans in different lobbies who'd wait 4 hours and leave without being seen. He paused. And I'd have solved nothing. I'd have moved the problem. So what do you want? Harmon said. I want to offer you something, Ethan said. And I want to be very clear that it's not mercy. I don't feel merciful. I've got a 7-year-old who's going to remember a man screaming at her father in a lobby for the rest of her life. So let's not confuse this with forgiveness. Harmon waited. You can walk out that door with your pride intact, Ethan said. Resign, keep the narrative. Tell yourself it was a hostile takeover and a personality conflict and never once have to look at what you actually did. That's option 1. It's clean. It's fast. Nobody stops you. And option 2, you stay, Ethan said. Not as administrator. That's over. You'd be director of operational compliance reporting to Patricia Hollis. Harmon's head came up. Say that again, he said. You'd report to Patricia Hollis, Ethan said. The nurse you were terminating on Wednesday. Your job would be to implement department by department every one of the reforms this building needs. The assistance program, the intake protocols, the equity standards. You'd build the thing you dismantled. And you'd do it under the supervision of the person you tried to destroy for trying to protect it. Harmon stared at him. That's not a job, he said. That's a punishment. It's both, Ethan said. I'm not going to pretend it isn't, but it's also the only version of this where anything you did in the last 4 years gets undone by the person who did it. He paused. And Richard, you're extraordinarily good at the operational side. That's not flattery. I read 4 years of your files. You can move an institution. You just moved it in the wrong direction because nobody ever put anything in front of you except a margin. Harmon didn't speak for a long time. She'll never accept it, he finally said. Hollis, she won't have me. She might not, Ethan said. That's her call, not mine. I'm not ordering her to take you. If she says no, option 2 is off the table, and you take option 1. He leaned back. But I'll tell you what I think. I think she'll say yes. And I think it's going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to you because she is going to be fair to you. Every single day. And you're going to have to sit with what that means about what you did to her. Harmon's hands were shaking slightly on the table. He noticed. He put them in his lap. Why? He said. His voice had gone rough. Why would you do this? You have 4 days of recordings. You could destroy me. Why would you? Because destroying you is easy, Ethan said. I could do it in an afternoon. I've done it before to worse men than you, and it never fixed anything. He paused. And because when I was 23, I worked for a man who withheld overtime from 8 guys who'd earned every hour of it. And I've spent 20 years being angry at him. And I've never once been able to figure out what I'd have wanted to happen to him that would have actually made any of it mean something. He looked at Harmon. This, he said. This is what I would have wanted. Silence. Take the day, Ethan said. Think about it. I need an answer by 5. He stood up. At the door, he stopped. Richard. Harmon looked up. When my daughter asked me why you were so cruel to me, Ethan said, I told her it was because you looked at me and decided you knew who I was. She's 7. She said, that's dumb. He paused. Then she said you'd never take the job. I asked her why. She said, and here his voice stayed completely level. Because he's the kind of person who thinks he's right, and you can't do things differently if you think you were right. He put his hand on the door. I've spent 24 hours hoping a 7-year-old was wrong, he said. He left. At 4:51 that afternoon, Ethan was in the 4th floor conference room going through department budgets when there was a knock. He looked up. Richard Harmon was standing in the doorway with the envelope in his hand. He came in. He stood at the table. He didn't sit. He put the envelope down. Then he tore it in half. I'll take the job, he said, if she'll have me. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. Sit down, he said. She's on her way up. Patricia Hollis walked into the 4th floor conference room at 4:58 and stopped when she saw who was sitting at the table. She didn't say anything. She looked at Richard Harmon. She looked at the 2 halves of a torn envelope in front of him. She looked at Ethan. No, she said. Sit down, Ethan said. Please. Mr. Carter. Ethan. Ethan. She stayed standing. Whatever this is, I want to say no before you say it, because I know what it is. Then say no after, he said. But hear it first. That's all I'm asking. She stood there for 4 full seconds. Then she pulled out a chair, the one furthest from Harmon, and sat down on the edge of it, like a person who has not agreed to stay. Ethan laid it out. Director of Operational Compliance. Reporting to her. Building the assistance program, the intake protocols, the equity standards. Under her supervision on her timeline subject to her evaluation. When he finished, Patricia was quiet. Then she turned and looked directly at Harmon for the first time. Say it, she said. Harmon looked at her. Whatever you came in here to say to me, she said. Say it now, because if I have to hear it in 6 weeks when you've had time to smooth it out, I won't believe a word of it. Harmon's hands were flat on the table. I was going to fire you, he said. I had the documentation prepped for Wednesday. I wanted you out before the quarter closed. I know, Patricia said. What else? I told the room that 11 years in this building made you think you'd earned latitude. His voice was very level and very quiet, and that it hadn't. What else? Harmon's throat moved. In the corridor, he said, when you told me about the Whitmore boy, the 4-year-old. He stopped. You started to cry, and you caught it. And what went through my head? Say it. I thought you were being unprofessional, Harmon said. Patricia Hollis went absolutely still. The room was silent for a long, dense moment. His name was Caleb, she said finally. The 4-year-old. His name was Caleb Whitmore, and he was on a ventilator for 9 days, and his mother is a school aide who makes $31,000 a year. Her voice did not rise. It got quieter. And you didn't know his name then, and you don't know it now. No, Harmon said. Do you know how much the bill was? No. $184,000, Patricia said. They're going to lose their house. That's not a maybe. That's happening. That family is going to lose their house because a 4-year-old couldn't breathe. She was gripping the edge of the table. And I stood in a hallway and told them there might be help because there should have been help, and you wrote me up for it. Harmon did not look away. Ethan noticed that. It was the first thing he'd noticed the man do that he respected. "Yes," Harmon said. Patricia sat back. She looked at Ethan, then at the wall, then at nothing for a long time. "Why should I take this?" she said. "Not to Ethan, to Harmon." "You shouldn't," Harmon said. She looked at him sharply. "I don't have an argument," he said. "I don't have a case. If you say no, you're right." He paused. "I'd say no." Patricia Hollis stared at him, and then something moved across her face, not softening. Something harder than softening. The look of a woman doing arithmetic. "The Whitmore file," she said. "Can it be reopened?" Ethan sat forward. "Retroactively. Their bill is in collections in 11 days, she said. If the assistance program comes back in 60 days, it's 49 days too late for them, and there are 19 other families in that same window." She looked at Ethan directly. "I've got the list. I've had the list for 2 years. I've been keeping it in a notebook in my locker because there was nothing else I could do with it." Ethan went very still. "You have a list," he said. 19 families, Patricia said. "Names, dates, amounts, and what happened to them. I started it in March of the year they killed the program." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just knew somebody needed to write it down." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out the green notebook, and set it on the table. 17 pages, he said. 4 days. Patricia looked at it. 2 years, she said. 61. And that was the moment Ethan Carter understood he had not saved this hospital. He had walked into a building where somebody had already been saving it alone in a locker with no authority and no support, and no expectation that anyone would ever read a word of it. He picked up his phone. "Get me the Whitmore file," he said to his attorney. "And 18 others. Patricia Hollis is sending you a list tonight. I want every one of those balances reviewed, and I want the collections holds filed before end of business tomorrow." He hung up. Patricia's hands had come off the table. "Are you serious?" she said. 60 days is for the program," Ethan said. "The 19 families are tomorrow." She put her hand over her mouth. She held it there for a long moment. And then Patricia Hollis, who had not cried in 11 years inside this building, who had caught it in a corridor, and swallowed it and gone back to work, sat in a conference room and let her shoulders go. Nobody said anything. When she took her hand down, her face was wet, and her voice was steady. "I'll take him," she said. Harmon looked up. "Not because I forgive you," she said. "I want to be extremely clear. I don't. I might never." She looked at him. "I'll take you because you're going to build it, all of it. Every piece you tore out you're going to put back with your own hands, and I'm going to be standing there while you do it." "Yes," Harmon said. "And the first thing you're going to do," she said, "is read the list, all 19, every name." "Yes." Out loud, she said, "to me." Harmon's face did something then that Ethan had not seen on it in 5 days. "Okay," he said. The financial assistance program went live on day 52. 8 days ahead of the binding deadline, which meant nobody collected a penalty, which annoyed Ethan's attorney slightly because she had drafted a very good penalty clause. Harmon built it. 14-hour days for 7 weeks. He did the department-by-department rollout. The intake protocol, rewrite the staff training, the third-party contract terminations. Patricia signed off on every stage. She rejected the first version of the intake form once because it asked for employment history on page 1 and once because the sentence explaining the program was written at a 12th grade reading level. "Rewrite it," she said. 8th grade, and take out the word eligibility. Nobody in a waiting room at 2 in the morning knows what that means when their kid is sick. He rewrote it. Ethan watched this happen from a distance and did not intervene once. There was a Tuesday in the 9th week when he came around a corner on the 2nd floor and found Harmon standing at the nurse's station with a clipboard listening to 2 floor nurses tell him with a directness that would have been unthinkable 4 months earlier that his new discharge protocol was adding 20 minutes to every release and was going to fall apart the first time the floor got busy. Harmon listened. He didn't defend it. He asked them what they'd do instead. They told him. He wrote it down. Ethan stood at the end of the corridor and watched a man take notes from a nurse. He didn't say anything. He walked away. Dr. Caroline Webb's first act on the Executive Medical Board was to kill a policy. It was a scheduling protocol that prioritized private room admissions in the pediatric intake queue. It had been in place for 3 years. It was the reason a veteran had sat in a lobby for 4 hours and 11 minutes. She brought it to the board in her second week with a 9-page analysis and killed it in 40 minutes. The board vote was unanimous. Robert Whitfield, who had voted for the original protocol 3 years earlier, voted to kill it and then asked to speak. "I wanted in the minutes," he said, "that I was told about this buyer in October, and I did nothing but send an email. I had a conversation with Richard Harmon about a man who was going to walk into this building and see exactly what we'd let it become, and I hung up the phone and went back to work." He paused. "I knew. I'd known for 2 years. I just didn't want to be the one who said it." He looked at Ethan. "I'm resigning from the board effective at the end of the fiscal year," he said. "Not because you asked me to. Because I should have been the one who bought this place, and I wasn't, and I've had 4 months to think about why." Ethan didn't accept it. "Stay," he said. "The people who know exactly what they let happen are the only ones who can stop it from happening again." Whitfield stayed. The veteran's name was Walter Briggs. It took Patricia Hollis 11 days to find him. She pulled the check-in logs for that Tuesday, cross-referenced them against everyone who never got called, and came up with 4 names. 3 were dead ends. The 4th was a 78-year-old retired postal worker in a rented duplex 40 minutes north, who had served 2 tours and hadn't been back to a hospital since the day he walked out of St. Gabriel's lobby. Patricia called him. He didn't believe her. She called again the next day. He hung up. The 3rd time she said, "Mr. Briggs, I'm not selling you anything. I'm calling because you sat in our lobby for 4 hours and 11 minutes, and nobody came, and you got up and left, and you thanked the woman at the desk on your way out, and she didn't look up. And I'm calling to tell you that somebody saw it." Long silence on the line. "Who saw it?" Walter Briggs said. "A man in the waiting room," Patricia said. "He wrote it down." Another silence. "Why?" Briggs said. "Because it was wrong," she said. Walter Briggs came in the following Thursday. He was seen in 19 minutes. Ethan met him afterward in the lobby, not by arrangement exactly. Patricia had mentioned the appointment, and Ethan had found a reason to be downstairs. Briggs looked at him with the flat, unhurried assessment of a man who has been evaluated by strangers his whole life, and learned to do it back. "You're the one," he said. "I'm the one," Ethan said. "You wrote me down." 4 hours and 11 minutes, Ethan said. "I timed it." Briggs was quiet. "I've been coming to hospitals for 50 years, he said. "You get used to a thing. You get used to being the last one." He paused. "You stopped noticing you got used to it." "I noticed," Ethan said. Walter Briggs looked at him for a long moment. Then he put out his hand. "Well," he said, "that's something." Diana Reyes came back in month 5, not as a patient. She came in through the front doors on a Wednesday morning, wearing a blazer she'd clearly bought for the occasion, and asked at the desk for the patient advocacy office. Patricia interviewed her for 40 minutes and hired her before lunch. "You don't have the background," Patricia said at the end. "You know that." "I stood at that window with my hands shaking," Diana said. "For 2 days, asking the same question 11 different ways because I thought if I found the right words, somebody would help me." "That's the background," Patricia said. Diana Reyes became a patient financial navigator. In her first year, she moved 406 families through the assistance program. She was very, very good at it. She knew exactly what the question sounded like when someone was too proud to ask it directly. The hospital did not put out a press release. Ethan's attorney had drafted one. It was excellent. It had a quote from him about renewed commitment and community values, and it would have run in 3 trade publications and generated a modest amount of goodwill. He killed it. "Why?" she asked. "Because the second we tell people we're the good guys, He said, "We start managing the story instead of doing the work. And in 4 years there'll be a version of this building that's very good at saying the right things and back to doing the old ones." He paused. "Nobody announces anything. We just do it. If people notice, they notice." People noticed. Not fast. Nothing about it was fast. But by the end of year 1, wait times in general intake were down 38%. Nurse retention had gone up for the first time in 6 years. 2 physicians who had left St. Gabriel for Mercy came back. And in the second year, something happened that Ethan had not planned for and could not have engineered. Nurses started applying, not from within the system, from out of state. Because word had moved through the actual channels that word moves through in that profession. Not press releases, not trade publications, but phone calls between people who trained together 15 years ago and still tell each other the truth. The thing they said was, "At St. Gabriel. If you tell a family the truth about their bill, nobody writes you up." That was it. That was the whole recruiting pitch. It was never printed anywhere. It was the most effective one in the state. Ethan never took an office. There was a very good one on the 5th floor with a window and a nameplate slot, and it stayed empty for the entire first year until Patricia finally requisitioned it for the advocacy department, which by then had 6 people in it and nowhere to put them. He worked from the 4th floor conference room when he was in the building, which was 2 or 3 days a week, and the rest of the time he was at home. Most of the staff who came to St. Gabriel after that first year never knew what he looked like. He didn't do all-hands meetings. He didn't do walkthroughs with an entourage. When he was in the building, he sat in the same chairs everybody else sat in the same clothes he'd worn the first day. There was a running thing among the newer nurses for about 18 months. A kind of half-joke that the owner of the hospital was a guy in work boots who sometimes sat in the lobby. Some of them thought it was a story, a legend, a thing the old-timers made up. Terrell, who by then had a title Director of Patient Experience invented specifically for him, after a conversation that had lasted 3 hours and changed the entire discharge process, used to hear the new hires say it and just smile. "Is it true?" one of them asked him once. "The lobby thing." Terrell looked at her. 19 years I worked here," he said. 22 now, and nobody ever said my name out loud in a room until that man did." He went back to his clipboard. "Yeah, it's true." Lily got the dog. It took 4 months of sustained, disciplined negotiation, during which she produced at various points a written care schedule, a cost analysis of dog food that she had researched independently, and a 1-page document titled Reasons that had 11 entries on it, the last of which was, "Because I was sick and I got better, and that's a good reason." Ethan read that one twice. The dog was named Biscuit. It had 4 legs, which Lily conceded was a compromise. She was 8 when the hospital's second-year numbers came in. Ethan was at the kitchen table going through them on a Saturday morning, and she climbed onto the chair beside him and looked at the page. "Is that the hospital?" "That's the hospital." "Is it good?" He looked at the numbers. "Yeah," he said. "It's good." She looked at him. "Did that man take the job?" she asked. "The mean one." Ethan set the page down. "He did," he said. Lily thought about that for a while. "Huh," she said. "You said he wouldn't." "I know. You said he was the kind of person who thinks he's right." "I know," she said. She was quiet for a moment. "Was I wrong?" Ethan looked at his daughter. "You were right about who he was," he said. "You were wrong about whether people can change. And I've never in my life been happier that you were wrong about something." She considered this with total seriousness. "Okay," she said. "And then because she was 8, can Biscuit come to the hospital?" "No." "Why?" "Because it's a hospital." "There are therapy dogs at hospitals," she said. "I looked it up." He put his head in his hands. The therapy dog program launched 14 months later. Biscuit failed the certification. Lily took it hard. Richard Harmon worked at St. Gabriel Medical Center for 6 more years. He never got his title back. He never asked for it. In year 4, Ethan offered him a promotion, a real one out of compliance into a senior operations seat, and Harmon turned it down. Why? Ethan asked. Harmon thought about it for a long time. Because the day I stop reporting to her, he said, is the day I start forgetting. He read the list every year, all 19 names, out loud to Patricia in her office on the anniversary of the day she'd made him do it the first time. She never let him stop. He never asked to. In year 6, Caleb Whitmore's mother sent a card to the hospital. Caleb was 10. He was fine. He played baseball badly and with tremendous enthusiasm. They had not lost the house. The card was addressed to patient advocacy. It didn't name anyone in particular because she didn't know who to name. It said thank you, and it said she still didn't fully understand what had happened because one day the bill was in collections and 11 days later it wasn't, and nobody had ever really explained it to her. Patricia read it standing up in her office. Then she walked down the hall to Harmon's office and put it on his desk without a word. He read it. He sat there for a long time. When he finally looked up, Patricia was still standing in the doorway. His name was Caleb Whitmore, Harmon said. Yeah, Patricia said. He's 10. He's 10. Harmon nodded slowly. He put the card down very carefully, like it weighed something. Thank you, he said. Patricia looked at him for a moment. 6 years. 6 years of standing in doorways watching this man do the work. You built the program that saved him, she said. You made the list that found him, Harmon said. Patricia Hollis was quiet. Then she said, yeah, okay. It was the closest they ever came. It was enough. Ethan Carter never told anyone. Not in an interview because he didn't give them. Not in a book because he didn't write one. Not at a conference because he didn't go. 12 years after the day he walked into that lobby with a sick child in his arms and a folder of documents organized with labeled tabs, there was still no public account anywhere of what had happened at St. Gabriel Medical Center. The reforms had been studied. 2 health systems had copied the advocacy model. Nobody outside the building knew where it came from. Most people who worked there knew him as the guy who came in a couple days a week and sat in the conference room and asked a lot of questions and remembered your name. Denise at the front desk worked there for another 19 years. She stood up every time he came through the doors for the first 6 months until he finally stopped in front of her and said, Denise, if you stand up one more time, I'm going to sit down on the floor. She never stood up again. She also never in 19 years let a single person wait in that lobby without being looked at. Not once. Lily Carter went to medical school. She didn't tell her father why. He never asked. He didn't have to. In her 4th year, she did a pediatric rotation at St. Gabriel. Dr. Caroline Webb, who by then had been running the department for a decade, was her supervising physician for 6 weeks and never once mentioned that she had met this student before when she was 7 and had come down to her eye level in an exam room and asked her to shake her hand. On the last day of the rotation, Lily said, Dr. Webb, you examined me here when I was 7. Webb looked at her over her reading glasses. I know, she said. You never said anything. You were here to learn medicine, Webb said, not to be somebody's story. Lily thought about that for the rest of her life. Her father sat in a lobby chair for 4 days and watched a building show him who it was, and what he had understood at 23, standing on a job site while a man withheld overtime from 8 guys who'd earned every hour of it, and what he had spent 20 years learning how to act on, was that power is not the ability to remove people from a room. Power is what you do on the day you finally have it. Richard Harmon had power for 4 years, and he used it to make a woman with 11 years of service feel like she was being unprofessional for caring about a 4-year-old who couldn't breathe. Ethan Carter had power for 1 morning, and he used it to void a termination notice before he signed his own name. That was the whole difference. That was all of it. There was no speech. There was no press release. There was no moment where the man in the work boots stood in the lobby and told everyone who he was and watched them understand. There was just a building full of people that got better, and a 78-year-old veteran who got seen in 19 minutes. and a mother in a blazer she bought for the occasion who spent the next 20 years finding families who were too proud to ask, and a nurse who kept a list in a locker for 2 years because somebody needed to write it down, and then got to spend the rest of her career watching every name on it get made right. The manager said, "This hospital isn't yours." He was wrong about the ownership. He was more wrong about something else.